this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda as circulated.
So moved.
Councilor Thorburn, seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We don't have any delegations here. It's nice with the restrictions that have been eased a little bit. We can go back to having some public. Five public total?
Up to 18 altogether.
Up to 18 people in here
Yes.
altogether, yes. So it's nice. Hats off to Nova Scotians who work really, really hard to get to only 8 active cases. We have announcements. I have to do announcements. A reminder that it's time again for submitting nominations for the volunteer awards. So if you have any nominations for the town's Representative Volunteer Award, in addition to the Volunteer Family Award and Corporate Volunteer Award, please send them into bridgewater.ca/volunteer or by contacting the Community Development Department. And the deadline to receive nominations has been extended to just the 18th of February, so clock is ticking. So again, if you have any ideas for volunteers, for individual, representative, family, or corporate, please send them into the Community Development Department. Are there any other announcements from members of council? Councilor Thorburn.
Just one, I just want to remember to the public that Friday is the town's birthday, February 13th. And I think we're 122 years young or old, depending on which way you do your math. 1899.
Yeah, it's going to be a little different this year. We can't hand out any goodies. And
No goodies, no cupcakes.
It's going to be a
Free skates.
free skate.
Free skate Saturday.
Free skate on Saturday at the LCLs.
Details to follow.
All right, thank you. Details to follow. Thank you, Pat. Anyone else with any announcements? Our next item is the minutes of January 25th regular council meeting. Any errors or omissions, deletions there? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Councillor Caldwell, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And we are quickly down to planning items, and we have a public hearing and second reading for 123 Empire. So I'll note that all the statutory requirements have been met, and I will call this public hearing to order and turn it over to Nelson Nolan, who will walk us through the public hearing.
Great. Am I clear? Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. It's almost like I'm actually there. Welcome to this presentation. This is the second reading and public hearing for the MPS and LEB amendment to the recreation zone. Just waiting for the slide to switch. There we go. So the current recreation zone is intended to accommodate land for recreation and organized sports activities and distinguishes lands from traditional park space and conservation land. So there's 8 properties with recreation zoning in town, most of which are owned by the town. So here are all of the properties in town currently zoned recreation. The main item of discussion today is the Bridgewater Memorial Arena located at 123 Empire Street. And the proposal is to amend the current permitted uses in the recreation zone to allow by site plan approval for parks, facilities, and transit facilities. This requires a concurrent amendment to the NPS and land use bylaw. And so the reason the applicant for this proposal is the engineering department. And they've expressed a need for parks operations to make use of the site for offices and storage, as well as for Bridgewater Transit operations to store vehicles. These are the 2 proposed definitions that would be added to the land use bylaw. They're very similar to public works facilities, which currently exists as a permitted use and is defined in the land use bylaw. And of note here is that it defines municipal government transit services as well as municipal government parks and equipment storage. So that would mean that only Bridgewater Transit could store vehicles in any property, in a building on a property currently zoned recreation, and not a private company. So the current authorized uses are really varied for the recreation zone. And if you've been to any event or use at the Memorial Arena, you're really aware of that. So there's cultural facilities, there's potential for visitor information centers, and even marinas, even though that obviously isn't possible at the Memorial Arena. So the amended recreation zone would include all of those land uses, as well as transit facilities and parks facilities by site plan approval. The site plan approval part there is really important. So site plan approval allows municipalities to gain control over the site characteristics of a development, such as the location of buildings, parkways, and walkways. And this will just ensure that transit and parks facilities will be compatible with surrounding land uses, particularly at the Memorial Arena site, which is primarily surrounded by residential uses. So 585 MPS objective statements are applicable in this circumstance. So taking a closer look at those, parks and transit facilities do not pose a conflict with existing surrounding land uses, especially with the mitigation of the site plan approval process. Proposed changes would increase land use diversity. They also maximize an existing facility. And it's important to note that the engineering department did explore looking at building a new facility, but it would have been extremely costly as opposed to just using the existing Memorial Arena for the same uses. It also supports the preservation of a historic building by adding another use and dimension to the building, and it doesn't compromise existing park spaces or open space or the open space network. Because this is kind of a one-off thing, it's very unlikely that the town would go and build another transit facility at another location. So IM6 review is done, which is required for all land use bylaw amendments. And yeah, just to reiterate, commercial and residential policies will be met through a site plan approval process. So there was a public participation meeting held on December 9th. There were 2 members of the public in attendance. Most of the concerns were around the possibility for facilities of this nature to be built in existing park locations like Kinsman Field or Generations Active Park. And we really kind of emphasized at that public participation meeting that it was highly unlikely that the town would build a new facility that would compromise an existing park use. So the recommendation is the council give second and final consideration to the amendments to the local municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw for the recreation zone. The next steps are for the amendments to be reviewed by the provincial director of planning. It's a 30-day review process, and notice of the amendments will be published in the local newspaper or the South Shore Breaker. And that's the presentation.
Thank you, Nelson. Any questions of the planner from members of council? This is second reading. We've kind of passed a bunch of these, but no, it's pretty straightforward. Normally I would ask the applicant if they have anything to add, but we are the applicant through engineering, so I think we're good there. And we've heard the concerns from the public that were addressed by staff. And so I am looking for a motion from council. Is anyone prepared to make that motion? Councillor McDonald.
I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater give second and final consideration to amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw to allow parks and transit facilities as permitted uses in the recreation zone as contained in Appendix A of document 20-190B.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And this, I will now adjourn our public hearing. So we're adjourned from that. Throw in another cheat sheet. And we'll go down to correspondence from information. We have Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing Safe Restart funding agreement that I think you've been waiting for a while.
We've already got the money spent. So,
Nothing like sending the money and then sending the terms and conditions.
yes, the good news just on that is we had a phone call, I think last week, with municipalities across the province to understand how we can spend these funds, because there were no parameters besides what you see in the letter. So what we brought to council in terms of projects that we felt would be eligible under this fund are, so we can continue with that. And any monies not spent can be placed in a reserve and then brought forward in next year's budget to finish those projects. So that's good news.
Any questions from council?
So we're not giving anything back?
No, we don't have to give anything back, but we can only spend it on COVID-19 restart initiatives.
Cool.
Good. All right. Our next item is 8.1. Actually, you know what? Yeah, maybe can we move Kent up? We have Kent here, who is the GM of the LCLC, and waiting patiently on Teams. So if council will indulge me, maybe we can move the LCLC capital budget for 21-22 up now, so that, I mean, you can stay for the whole meeting. It's pretty exciting, but...
I have kids to get to bed.
All right, well, that seems like a pretty good excuse. Why don't we turn it over to Ken? Do you want to walk us through? Did you have like a little presentation or anything for us?
Just the capital budget spreadsheet that was supplied. I think it's near the end of your package,
Yep.
page 36, I think. Is everyone good with that? Have it at hand?
Yeah, we should all have that. We all have that.
Yeah, perfect. So this is a bit more of a story than I wish it was, but we've started this energy conservation project last year. So kind of for the entire time that I've been at the LCLC, we've been working towards this. Last year we came to council for a phase one part of the project monies, and this year we're coming back for the second. So you'll see here the kind of phase one. It's a little bit cryptic. I'm happy to answer any questions, but ground loop fluid replacement, ice plant optimization, heating loop piping, all of this, what really matters is it's an energy conservation project, so it's going to save us in the neighborhood, these are all estimates at this point, but in the neighborhood of $75,000 a year in energy, and offset 400, more than 400 tons of CO2. So reading down through this in the way that I tried to make it make sense the most, we're moving into the second phase of the project. Well, we're landing the first phase. We're in design and tendering, and we're moving on to rink dehumidification, which isn't necessarily an energy conservation measure. It's an operational upgrade to the facility. So that has a price tag of $600,000 with the design and engineering cost of $90,000. Below that, there's two items that we have. The Wi-Fi upgrade we've started work on, so we're a little over halfway done on the Wi-Fi installation. Part of that is actually we met with some folks from the town on supporting the library, getting onto your phone system, basically. So actually with that Wi-Fi upgrade, we were able to stage our hardware to transition the phones for the library, so it's part of that line as well, and then a website redesign at $10,000. So our website is quite aged, and hoping to put some money into it to make it more user-friendly and navigable, and set us up for the next 5 years. So that brings us to a total capital expense of $1.586. And we have a capital carryover from the last year's capital budget of $751,000. So the capital budget request for this year is $835,600. Split between the two partners, that equates to $417,800.
Great. Thanks, Kent. Questions from council on any of those? Councilor McDonald?
Just for clarification, the rink dehumidification upgrade not only enhances the level of service, but it will protect some of the equipment, very expensive equipment that's there now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's totally correct. So we get a very high humidity environment for kind of 4 or 5 months of the year, and it's deteriorating a lot of the electronics in the arena. It's causing rust and mold throughout. So there's definitely that element as well.
Other questions?
Do you want a motion?
Sure, we'll take a motion.
Sure. I see a couple there, but anyway, I would move that council for the town of Bridgewater transfer the LCMPCC's unspent capital funds from 2020-21, estimated to be $751,000, to be placed in reserve at year end and used as funding for the 2021-2022 LCMPCC capital budget to fund the complete energy project, work being carried over into 2020 to 2022 capital budget.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Frazier. Any discussion on that?
Question?
Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Do you want to make the next
Sure.
motion, Councilor Thorburn?
I would move that council of the town of Bridgewater pre-approve the LCMPCC's capital budget for 2021-22 in the amount of $1,586,600, which includes the reserve amount of $751,000, with each council's contribution being $417,800.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Frazier again. Any questions of the general manager? Any questions on any of those items?
Just one of it, I may. I know that dehumidification's been an ongoing problem up there, so how soon will that be started so we can get that behind us?
Yeah, I actually had a call this afternoon with MCW. It's an interesting time to try and be doing these projects because the federal government has flooded so much money into facilities that it's really straining on some of these companies like MCW, the engineering firm that we're working with. So we're working to going to have kind of the first steps in that process next week, and then we'll go forward with scoping and basically we're in a design phase now for the energy conservation project. Once the design is done, it goes to tender, and then the engineers kind of just we sit and wait for 3 weeks while we get those tenders in and review them and stuff. But there's not nearly as much to do, so they're going to be focused on the design for the next 6 weeks, and then we'll move into kind of the taking a really hard deep dive and maybe even getting into design on the dehumidification in March.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the supply chain is fairly broken on a lot of this stuff too, for getting these components from overseas, and so it's an unpredictable time to be kind of bringing these components in, but we'll move on it as quickly as possible. So the sooner we have it, the sooner we have the energy conservation, and the sooner we start saving money, and the same with the dehumidification, we reap the benefits right away. So we'll move as quickly as we can. Yeah, and then I should say just one last thing really quickly, that like I said, there's quite a bit of money out there and we're chasing it. So hopefully I'm coming back to you in not too near future with some good news about some of the grants to offset the work that we're doing currently.
Great. Thanks, Kent. Any other questions? We have a mover and a seconder. Ready for the question?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, Kent.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Oh, lots happening at the LCLC.
Yeah.
That dehumidification project is huge, though, because it's going to prevent lots of other issues going forward.
Guarantees extension of the season.
Yeah, and exactly that. As we move into summer ice,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we'd be able to do it without the dehumidification. Just the change in temperature creates quite an issue there, so that'll be good. Going back up to correspondence for action, 8.1 is the letter from the municipality of the District of Lunenburg requesting to extend transit service to Osprey Village. For context for the public, on December 8th, MODL Council passed a motion, as I just said, just requesting the Bridgewater Transit be extended to exit 12. I'll admit I was a little surprised and disappointed that that was the motion. We've stated a number of times the complications with transit extending beyond one municipal boundary because the UARB becomes involved. It complicates things, for example, like the Kinsmen are now doing free rides on Saturdays in February. That would have to be approved by the UARB, which means you have to be giving them enough lead time to be able to do that, where these generally come in kind of last minute. Changes in schedule, changes in routing, things like that would all have to go through the UARB. It becomes a very cumbersome process. They would dictate fares, they would dictate schedule, things like that. Right now, the service is a 1 hour loop. Every stop is the same time, every hour, so it's very predictable. Going to exit 12 obviously complicates that. Each stop will be at a different time each hour. So the letter doesn't address that, and it doesn't address any kind of funding. Municipality District of Lunenburg has said that they've put transit funding in a reserve over the last number of years, so there is transit funding. So again, I was disappointed that the letter was just, we request you extend transit service to exit 12 versus we would like to begin having conversations about how to solve a transit problem to exit 12. They have a motion on the books for where they directed staff to issue an expression of interest open to any nonprofit organization, business, or municipality to work with MODL to provide a transportation service between Osprey Village area and exit 12 in the town of Bridgewater. So to me, that is very different. The language in that is to work with MODL, which is kind of what I had expected, versus, again, we request you extend transit service to exit 12. So that's kind of what I had hoped. And to be perfectly clear, I think I'm an open-minded person. That's why we have things like transit, that our council is open-minded, that we have Bridgewater Transit, we have things like Energize Bridgewater, these kind of things that are not everyday occurrences in municipalities our size. So I think we're all willing to have the conversation on how to solve that, whether it's that hub and spoke model we've talked about, where Bridgewater Transit is a hub and there's spokes coming in from Lunenburg or Mahone Bay or Exit 12 or New Germany or wherever, and they link up, or whether it's MODL contracting with a taxi service to just provide a shuttle between Exit 12 and the Irving at the top of Silver's Hill at the time when our bus arrives. There's a whole bunch of options that are, worth discussing. So I'd love to hear from council. Where I'm at is, I just was disappointed that it was not we would like to have a conversation about transit. It was more of a bring us transit. So I thought that was unfortunate. So I'm all I'm all ears for around the table what people are thinking. Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah. I'll weigh in a little bit, but I could see supporting this if they had a bus of similar size or smaller size that would travel from New Germany and meet our bus at the Irving. And that's probably, they could arrange an hour turnaround too, so then they come in our bus and we come back and then they'd have their loop completed. But just to go there and back, it changes so much and it complicates so much that we work so hard to maintain that hour schedule. And if they would work with us and go as far as New Germany or wherever an hour would take them and meet our bus there, then they could come to town and take our route and go back. And I think it would work out fine, but to try and adjust for that, it may be done, but it's going to be very complicated.
Others around the table,
Yeah.
Councillor Frazier.
And I agree as well that, they're, to have the conversation and how, our service can complement, meeting the needs of whether it's going to Walmart. But I think, like you said, we have to have the dialogue and have the conversation as to the expectations from what are we contributing to that. As we said, the 1 hour loop works well, and we've worked hard to establish those bus routes and tweaked it as needed. But I think the first step would be to have the conversation and see what their expectations are from public transit for Bridgewater. Yeah.
Councillor Caldwell.
I think there's numerous opportunities to potentially partner with MODL for bus service. A wider bus service may actually even improve the service we have. And I think we simply do that by asking them if they'd like to sit down and negotiate something. There are barriers to simply sending our buses out to exit 12. It's certainly not that simple. But if they're willing to sit down and talk about things, I welcome that.
There's Councillor McDonald.
I sat on the Joint Transit Committee for a couple of years, at a point where we got really bogged down and we were having a lot of trouble figuring out how to move forward. And the option of having Bridgewater as a hub try the service, have a pilot, and see where it could go was really exciting to that group at the time. It presented a lot of opportunity, and I think now that Bridgewater's transit has been established and the opportunity, we've proven that it can work, and so now is a great time to start looking at all of those other communities that need to connect, and I think that's really exciting because we don't just want to move people around Bridgewater, we want to bring them to town. We want to make sure that they can get where they need to go. We want to be able to serve the region as a region, not just as one small pocket. So I think it's a great conversation to have. We recognize that there are barriers and that there's challenges for us. Has been true with an awful lot of our services, if not all. The ability to pivot and react and respond to the needs of our community really quickly has proven extremely beneficial for us. I'm really concerned about jeopardizing that by just simply extending our transit beyond our borders. It would really take away some of that ability to respond to the community's needs. But there are so many other opportunities, and I'm really hopeful that we can have that conversation, that we can reach out to Modal and maybe send a letter, respond to them and say, we're ready for that conversation now that we have really established our transit. I think that was always the direction that we were hoping to go in, and I think good things can come of that conversation. So I'm definitely in favor of moving in that direction for a conversation.
Do we know when their EOI closes, their expression of interest closes?
I don't believe they've gone out for it yet.
Oh, they haven't gone out for it yet?
I don't
Oh, okay.
So I think the expression of interest is really the piece that starts the conversation, right? That's the one that just goes out to everybody, including Bridgewater and not-for-profits and groups like Citizens for Public Transit, and said, the language of it, to me, made that discussion possible. And what I'm hearing around the table is we want to have the conversation. The letter doesn't actually even indicate what they're looking for. 7 days a week, 6 days a week, 5 days a week. I don't know. Again, it doesn't address the funding, so I read it through a lens of the Bridgewater taxpayer, and I don't even know how to have a conversation with a commercial taxpayer in Bridgewater in a way that tries to explain why their tax dollars would be paying to take their customers to a business that doesn't contribute to the service or the tax base. And I'm sure that's not the intention of MODL's request, but the request is so short that, again, I just keep looping back to, we need to sit down and have the conversation so that they understand our limitations, but we also understand their needs, because perhaps there's a way to link those up. So, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing around the table is going back to MODL, requesting that we sit down and have that conversation to figure out what the options are.
Well, just to skip a step, perhaps, or skip a meeting, could we not just write to them and suggest they've read all the articles and listened to all of our discussions about the restrictions and the issues we have, based on commercial, customers in the town of Bridgewater not being happy about us just doing this, and the fact that it should be subsidized in some way, and the UARB issue and so on. So can we write back to them requesting that they make a proposal to us first? What are you willing to commit in funding? What service levels do you want? And at least that way we have a starting point when we do meet with them versus meeting with them and just rehashing the same sort of thing. Does that make sense? I don't know.
It almost sounds like we want them to go out with their expression of interest, saying, we would like someone to provide service meeting these targets at this, like with a budget, so that we can either, respond to the expression of interest, or someone responds to the expression of interest. That's really what it sounds like, because then everyone would know what they're looking for, right? Because again, the answer may not even be Bridgewater Transit. It may be partnering with a shuttle service or a taxi. If all you're expecting is, at 42 minutes after each hour, someone has to be at Walmart to get them to the Irving for 50 minutes after the hour to make sure that they can get the bus and back and forth. But to your point, we don't know. So,
We can ask them.
yeah, we can.
In advance of a meeting.
Yeah, and we don't need a formal motion to.
We just give direction that we,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll start the process. I think that we're all on the same page for that, and we're willing to try having that conversation for sure. So, good. Any other discussion on that? So we'll reach out to MODL and we'll come back to council and let you know how that goes, and maybe get some traction on that. All right. Good. Down to reports and recommendations. 9.1, strategic priorities, work plan, and update. Yeah, turn that over to the CEO.
So you have two documents there. One is an update for quarter 3. So that'd be up to the end of December of 2020, and that provides you with an update with regards to council's strategic priorities at that point, as well as departmental activities. So I can perhaps just highlight the strategic priority piece. You have the detailed departmental updates attached to that. So if you have any questions on those, I can answer them, and if not, we'll get you the answer. So with the strategic priorities, the sanitary stormwater phasing plan, the target there is our last quarter. So before the end of this fiscal year, we'll have the draft report. And through the last quarter, they've been analyzing the data that they've collected through doing the flow monitoring testing and the smoke testing and preparing that report. So soon we'll be able to look at that and then develop the phasing plan for improvements. The sewer rate transition strategy, and the last quarter, council received a report, a presentation from staff in December that outlined the sewer rate, which would be moving to a consumption-based rate as opposed to just a blanket charge amount, and some of the challenges with that have to be overcome, which will take some time. So we discussed with council strategy for 2021-22, and then looking at full implementation or phase into that implementation in 22-23. We also discussed the betterment charges and a way to address the ability to accommodate development now, knowing that we are at capacity with our wastewater system. So council gave us some direction at that meeting to proceed and look at drafting a bylaw. The business park, we are well into phase 2 of design. So phase 2 involves the design of the interchange and the connector road and services along that connector road. So we're planning, the province is planning to go to tender on those in the spring of 21-22, and construction starting next fiscal year, so that'll be good. And the cost sharing agreement was finalized between the province and the town as well.
Councilor Caldwell?
For exit 12A, will active transportation be taken into consideration?
In terms of so what we have is, at this point, we've developed within the interchange, a sidewalk that goes across the interchange, and that's as far as we've gone. So in terms of active transportation on the connector road, that would be a future future project, given the capital requirements. So council, I think, we can add that on in the future, just not at this moment. But the interchange is built with the sidewalk, so that, things that'd be too expensive to go back after the fact and put in.
And that was council's addition to that.
was.
So we were given the option to not put the sidewalk in the overpass, and it was one of the last things the previous council did, was to make sure that, to the CAO's point, we did that now, so we're not putting a sidewalk in after the fact.
Yeah, that was I believe, a $400,000 commitment, but it would have been a lot more if we had to go and try to add something on to an overpass. The town master plan, so that's to look at how we develop out the lands north of the 103 when the interchange goes in, as well as some of our other undeveloped areas of the town, whether owned by the town, the land, or privately owned. So we awarded the RFP, and we also awarded the market analysis scope for the land north of the 103. So we anticipate that we'll have the draft report in the first quarter of 2021, so in April, and we'll have a workshop with council in the first quarter as well. That will outline the concept for how we would develop out those areas in terms of road layout and infrastructure, as well as the market analysis and what we could anticipate would be the type of development we'd see there and how we should go about approaching that. Council orientation was done in the last quarter as well of 2021, and so that's been completed. Wastewater offsetting charges, and I think I've already referred to those. We presented this with the sewer rate transition strategy. So we are targeting the first quarter of 2021 to bring back to you a development charges bylaw, as well as a communication strategy, and then we'll start looking at our planning policy and how we can align that with some of our wastewater capacity issues. I call it Energize Bridgewater. That is a separate update. You'll see that in the quarterly report. It's quite detailed in terms of what we're doing in Energize Bridgewater. The land sales marketing, we do have a draft done, and we are deferring that for council's review until the economic development officer starts. I can advise that we do have someone in place, and we'll do a little bit more of a formal announcement the closer we get to that, but it's anticipated in the last quarter of this fiscal year, which is right around now, probably the end of February. This individual will start looking at those things, so we'll be able to bring them forward to council. Asset management, so the FCM funding application around has opened up, and we'll be submitting an application. So we had to do an asset management readiness test, and Allison's preparing that application for funding. And that will help us develop the policy and the plan for asset management. And we also undertook a training session with some of our core staff that work with data and collect information about our assets. So we did that in the last quarter as well. Port of Bridgewater is on hold. Reserve policies we're targeting to bring to you this quarter. The debt policy we've been looking at the debt affordability model and providing council with information as you make big decisions about investments, capital investments. We show you how, what our financial situation is with respects to debt, and we project that out. So we're using the model now, and what we're proposing is to bring to you a policy in the first quarter of 2021 that would provide some parameters around debt. When we borrow, what's the term, those types of things, and what's the debt service ratio you don't want to exceed, just to provide some direction. The open space plan, we're targeting the last quarter of this year to bring that to you. The active transportation plan renewal, we completed that in the last quarter, so we brought you the implementation plan for council's agreement. And the accessibility plan, so we'll be, the draft plan's been completed by the committee. That was done in the last quarter. And we will be bringing, or have brought to council, I believe, last week, or the week before, at a joint council session, the draft plan for council to receive. And we will receive it here at this council formally this last quarter, probably towards the end of February, beginning of March, for approval. So that's the update. And as I indicated, you have the more detail within the departmental activity plans as well.
It's a little bit to do there. Any questions from council? Councilor
Not a
Thorburn?
question, but a compliment. I just love those reports because you can read and see where we've been and where we're going, how we're going to get there. It just all comes together.
Yeah.
And it's just an awesome job, Tammy. Thank you very much.
I look at that and I get excited because there's a lot. I know it's a lot. You're probably less excited because it's a lot that you have to do. I'm excited for you. I look at it and go, there's a lot happening. And like Exit 12A is massive, but the opportunity is massive. And I know Councilor Thorburns looking at asset management going, this is that's huge for you to have that done. So all this stuff is just, it means we're busy, and busy is good because not every community is busy, and so I'm happy. And just so the public, if they're reading this report, they're probably like, aren't you in Q1 now? It's February. Our year goes beginning of April to the end of March, so we are in our final quarter. So we don't work on a calendar year, so I know that can be sometimes confusing to some. Anything else to add on that one? Okay.
So the next document is the strategic priorities and work plan for 2021-22. So this is based on the outcomes or results of a workshop that council attended on January 8th and 9th of 2021, where council was asked to take a 4-year look in terms of where council felt they would be, what would success look like to them at the end of a 4-year council term. What is it you want to achieve? And then we broke that up into segments and looked at what would make most sense for council to start and work on in this coming fiscal year. And with that, we identified what the issue was so that everyone was clear. This is what it means, and here's what our agreed upon outcome would be. And then the management team took that, looked at options for how we could achieve that, and then came up with some actions for 2021 with some targets and who's responsible for them. And then we take that and we put that into the strategic priority chart, which is that one-page document that identifies the priorities that are now and next, and then some departmental activities. So some of these are familiar themes or categories because they're long-range plans. So wastewater strategy phasing is one that's already on our list, and this is one where we want to ensure we address overflows and the challenges we have with accommodating growth given that we're at capacity. And we want to understand what the capital investments are going to be in order to meet the 2036 guidelines. And the outcome would be that we're meeting those guidelines. We have betterment charges so that we're able to accommodate growth and have reduced overflow occurrences. We have a sewer rate transition to a consumption charge and the ability to set up reserves to plan for long-term capital and operating cost. So the community, this is a cross-departmental initiative, so we'll have engineering, community development, and finance and admin all working on that. So you can see the actions kind of lay out from there in terms of the wastewater management plan, which we already talked about, the betterment charges, the sewer rate, and then our planning piece with our planning documents. The next is Exit 12A, which we've already gone over, but at the end of the day, we have an interchange that's going in, providing an opportunity for us in terms of expanding our business and industrial park across the 103. We own land in that area, and we are going to be bringing services to that area. So the outcome will be a development concept plan completed that identifies land use and infrastructure, a marketing plan in place, and we have a target of land sales by 2023-24. So it doesn't mean we're starting to market it in that year. That means we're experiencing the sale of land at least by then. So we have some actions identified for this year, which we've already gone over in the update. And that, again, is an initiative that takes multiple departments to complete. Affordable housing is a new one, and that was identified as a priority. And the issue there is a need to understand the housing needs, affordable housing needs, and what are the possible roles for the town of Bridgewater in that. The outcome will be defined roles and options for the town. So we are going to be looking at some immediate requests that we have with respects to affordable housing and what options are there for us to support that. And then we're going to have a comprehensive review of options, constraints, opportunities, next steps, and provide council with that report. And we're targeting March of 2021 for that. The Bridgewater Memorial redevelopment is another one that was identified, and this isn't new, but it's brought back as a priority where we need to have a clear vision for the building, and the outcome would be that we have that and a plan to get there. And so we held a discussion session actually last week with respects to this, and we'll be bringing that back again to council in February for further discussion. And there's some capital items in your budget that you'll be asked to consider based on the outcome of our discussions that we have next week. Tax strategy and debt strategy. So as I indicated to council, we've been providing you with information on our debt affordability using the debt affordability model that was developed by the Municipal Finance Corp. We have significant capital investments and an aggressive capital plan. A lot of it brought on by wastewater challenges, and we need a strategy to achieve sustainable long-term debt and a sustainable tax rate. So we'll be having a tax rate strategy discussion in February with council to provide you with the information that you need and enable you to have that discussion about how we make that sustainable long-term. We'll have a debt management policy to you in June, reserve policies. We already have a long-term capital budget, but we'll be looking at a long-term operating budget as well. So you'll have that big picture and be able to project out. Economic development. The issue for council was the need to define what we want to do and be strategic about it. So a lot of things are more ad hoc, and this is to be a little bit more strategic with how we do it. Council last year identified that the role they wanted to take was to be more active and actually create an economic development officer position. So the lead will be that individual, and that individual will be in place at the end of the month. And we'll have that individual working on an economic development strategy this year, and we look to hope that for that draft to be completed by the end of the calendar year and implementation in early 2022. Energize Bridgewater, all the actions there are commitments under our funding agreement with the federal government. When we won the Smart Cities application, the money came with conditions that were based on the application we submitted. So you'll see that all the actions there reflect what we said we would do and when. Asset management plan, we've already discussed that in the update. And the outcome for this year will be to have a plan and a policy in place. Alternative revenue sources, council identified that there was a high reliance on tax revenue, and we need to look at ways to diversify our revenue to address growing cost. So the outcome would be less reliance on the tax rate for revenue and new sources of revenue identified. So we'll be taking some actions this year to look at that to see what options are available. An infrastructure master plan would be similar to the master plan for Exit 12A, just extended out to other areas within the town. The open space plan is one that I indicated we would have that to you at the end of this year, and this is a plan that would address the question about what do we have, what are the gaps, is there opportunities for connectivity. So that plan will identify that. And the accessibility plan, I already reviewed that with you when we did the update. And the last two items are Recreation 2.0. And the issue here was we need to match programming and services that we offer to the needs of our residents. We've been noticing a decline in registrations and program revenue, and why. And we wanted to look at regional collaboration. So the outcome would be, we're looking at online program registration, regional collaboration, and a change in our programs to increase program registration as well. A little bit more focus on the outdoors and the active experience with that. And business improvement district. And so the issue for council was downtown business engagement, which is needed to find solutions to issues unique within the business improvement area that would be identified. An example of that would be parking. And the intent there is that businesses are part of the solution, and the question is, are they willing to participate or create a business improvement district? So the outcome would be, we would know that, and have the business community engaged around that concept. So we'll be working on that, and the Economic Development Officer will be the lead this year for that. So those are your strategic priorities for 2021-22, and if approved by council, they would form the basis of the development of the budget and individual departmental work programs.
Again, there's an awful lot in there. It's exciting. Questions to the CAO, comments? Councilor Thorburn.
Tammy, with our reserves, operation and capital, I'm sure we're getting some interest on them.
We do. Some has to stay with the reserves, and some goes to revenue, for revenue to fund the budget.
Is there any way that some of that could be reinvested at a higher rate?
You would have to look at, one of the things that I think Kim is going to be looking at in time is an investment policy.
Yes.
So right now they're in very low. One is cash flow, so you don't want to lock it in if you use your reserves to borrow against for cash flow, which we do.
Yeah.
Right, so we might have short-term GICs and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But an investment policy is something that I don't believe we have, and something that Kim's identified that should be brought forward to council at some point to look at.
I know we used to do projects and take it from that and pay ourselves back.
Yep.
But I'm just looking at the possibility to reinvest in that at a higher rate.
Yeah.
With a policy, we could do that. I know we couldn't do it all, but I think we have to look at various options to get as much off of our reserves as we can.
Yep, and one of the things that we are going to, with the reserve policy that's coming forward, is we'll be looking at setting some targets for council in terms of building up your reserves.
Yes.
So the more you have in there, the more opportunity you have to do stuff,
Right.
just like you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments on that? That's pretty detailed. I'd encourage the public to go and look at the documents online, see all that's there, and if they have questions, reach out to any one of us and ask those questions. Our next item is the Lunenburg County Senior Safeties Program January 2021 report. Sound like a broken record, but every time I read this, I'm just blown away of the need in the community, and grateful that we have this program in place. So it's just the people that are served by this, it's just amazing. So that's there for your information. We already dealt with the LCLC capital budget, so we're down to legal services contract renewal. Document 21-011A.
So council entered into, or actually in 2016, they jointly went with the District of Lunenburg to a proposal call for legal services. And at that time, both the town of Bridgewater and the municipality of the District of Lunenburg entered into individual contracts for a 5-year term with a 2-year renewal option. And that was awarded to Power Dempsey, Leaf and Ready in 2016. So the contract, the 5-year term will expire March 31st, 2021. And as I indicated, there's an option for a 2-year renewal expiring March 31st, 2023. So staff have reviewed this to look at what council would want to consider. the pricing details were provided in camera, and so council's aware of that, but that is one factor, is price. The other is quality of level of service. So senior management were solicited because they're usually the individuals that will use the legal services, and we use it for municipal law, planning matters, enforcement, prosecutions, those types of things. And overall, there was no concerns with the quality of the service that was provided. And for that reason, the recommendation was that we look at an extension for the 2-year renewal. During that period, staff will prepare a proposal call and also look at what other opportunities may be available to partner with other municipal units, if it's a factor in pricing. But municipal law is a field of law that perhaps isn't as common. So sometimes looking at other municipal units and seeing what can be done there is useful. So we'll do that. We'll prepare a proposal call and have that probably in 2022 for council's consideration, well in advance of the contract expiring.
Any questions to the CEO?
Ready for a motion?
Yes, please.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater renew the legal services contract with Power Dempsey, Leaf and Ready for a period of 2 years commencing April 1st, 2021 and ending March 31st, 2023, as provided for in Clause 1B of the legal services contract.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Frazier. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And that quickly brings us to the end of the meeting. We have an in-camera meeting following this to deal with a legal matter. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Councilor Thorburn, seconded by Councilor Frazier. We are adjourned. Thank you.